Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know this is a little different setting, but I figured I'd do something out here after I just scared off some elk and whitetail. Elk aren't in season, but that whitetail jumped out of here and in 1.5 bounds it was down a hill and halfway to Timbuktu. I've been out here hunting with Cliff and Jeremy all week, and it's been a really good time. It's made me think a lot about the reasons why I'm doing this podcast and the whole purpose behind it. And the reason it's called the Albino Peacock is because, for one, there was a time when I was a kid and I was walking down a mountain dirt road near my family home, and I saw a white peacock, and it was quite the memorable experience. And I thought as a little kid maybe it was some Native American spirit. And also I learned when I was in my young teens the idea of peacocking, which has to do with other social dynamics and not anything to do with the Peacock podcast, the Albino Peacock podcast. But what I did learn from that whole idea was there's such a thing as honest signals. Honest signals are things that cannot be faked, or at least not be faked very long around people with any level of sophistication. And the peacock, the theory behind it is that when the male peacock sees a female during the mating season, he'll spread his fan and show it off to her. Because technically speaking, the fan is really not helpful to evolution at all, to mating, to survival, because it gets in the way. It allows something for the predators to attach to. It's not useful. And the belief is that based on the color and the pattern and all of these things, the health of the fan, that the female then chooses to mate or not. And the peacock just can't fake that. And there are things that we do that tells other people who we are. And that just cannot be faked. Or at least just not for a very long time. And with Cliff and Jeremy out here, it's been a really good reminder as to why we're friends. For instance, with Cliff, there was a time we went to the local store here. We're way outside of a way little town, way far away from anything at all. And we went and got some groceries that we had forgotten before we came out here, 3.5-hour drive. And he remarked about some friends of his who, if they forgot to get milk at Costco, wouldn't get milk while they are out here just because they weren't going to pay an extra $1 a gallon. Whereas Cliff said, here's a young single mom in this podunk town trying to make a living and is providing a service, and it sure as heck beats driving an 1.5-hour round trip to another town to get milk. And man, this was 8 years ago at least. And I paused and I thought about it, and I looked at Cliff and I said, you see yourself as a benefactor to those around you, don't you? And he paused and looked at me and said, yeah. And I remember thinking, I would have been 22, 23, maybe 24 at the time, but I don't think I was even that age. And I thought, man, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. And Jeremy, I met at Toastmasters, and he owns another window cleaning business, and I worked for him first. It's where I learned the trade. After hearing him speak, I asked to join his crew, and I told him, I've worked for people since I was 6 years old. I make a good employee, but I don't enjoy it. I've always wanted to have my own business. Could I join your crew and learn the trade? And maybe at some point I would branch out on my own. And he said, sure. And for 3 years, he taught me the trade and showed me the ins and outs and showed me the tools and how to bid accounts and accrue accounts and retain accounts and all of those things. And by the first year, I was moonlighting. And by the second year, I had maybe a day off a month because I was working weekends. And then the third year, I quit, but I stayed an extra 3 or 4 weeks past my 2-week notice to make sure they got through the busy season. And then towards the fall, I worked for him again for about a month or so. And for 2 years after that, I set aside 2 days where he could book me. And he could send me off to a job that would take a truck and a crew of 2 to do in a day, whereas I could do it in a day. And we're still best of friends. And having friends like that who want to see everybody win, being around people like that is just such a positive experience. And I come across other people who have such a negative, competitive outlook and kind of like dog eat dog, and the pie is only so large and we all have to get our slice of it. And I can understand where they're coming from. It's just, especially with how I'm built, made, I can't get on board with that, which makes it difficult for them to be friends like me, because I don't I don't give their beliefs and rationale lip service. But being around positive people like Trina, Cliff, Michael, Jeremy, we all want to see each other succeed. And being out on a hunt, we all want to see everyone succeed. And when one wins, we all win. And it's such a primal callback to when we actually had to rely on each other directly, not just indirectly, for our day-to-day survival and being able to be happy for other people's success. Being around people like that has shaped me so much. And all I can really do is encourage everybody to find friends like that. There are the platitudes and cliches of a rising tide raises all ships, and Einstein said, what are we here for if not to make life easier for each other? And there was a recent quote that was quoted at me of, we rise by raising others. That airy-fairy stuff, sometimes I don't like to quote it because they're quoted by people who are trying to tell me Mercury is in retrograde and pulling crystals out of their bras. And yes, I actually have known people like that. But, some things just remain true. And aligning ourselves with natural law, figuring out how things work. And sometimes we get so caught up in why things work the way that we do, why things work the way they do, that we then don't actually operate it. It's like we don't have to understand how an internal combustion engine works in order to drive a vehicle. We just have to know that you can't be on the gas and the brake at the same time. And a lot of us live that way, where we fluctuate so much back and forth between fear and love that it's unsettling and it's uncomfortable. And spending more and more time around people who are full of love and abundance and have this idea that there's more than enough to go around, and that when someone wins, everybody wins. I found that it's very true that a good friend is not just someone you can share bad news with, but it's someone with whom you can share good news. Because I've known a lot of the people in my life who were so happy to hear that I had bad news. And they were always contrary when I had good news, would always caution me to reason and not be so optimistic and not to get my hopes up. And I'm just not friends with those people anymore. And there's such a thing as fair weather friends, but they want to see you doing well, just not better than they're doing. And that's a really sad existence. My hope is with this podcast to be able to share ideas, to have conversations that I know a lot of people don't have on a regular basis, and to make more people privy to them. I think that's a truly wonderful thing. It's a great excuse to get together with my friends and have a conversation, be able to just sit down and talk through an idea or several ideas or problems. And that's the main reason why it's the Albino Peacock podcast, is because there are just some things that can't be faked. And hearing these friends of mine talk about their convictions and things that have helped them succeed, and the way they focused on harmonizing and cooperating with others. It's one shot. Maybe somebody got something. Harmonizing, cooperating with others, and not just finding the joy and pleasure in that, but finding the success in that. And competition in a healthy way comes from co-pedere, or patere. Not entirely sure of the Latin pronunciation, but it means together, pedere, striving for. So it means together striving for. It's a bit like the way feet, one goes ahead so that the other can go ahead. That's the way my mother described it to me. Being able to see the joy when they talk about the successes they've had and the successes their friends have. It's one of the reasons why I wanted them to be a part of my group, and it's one of the reasons I'm so happy that I get to be a part of their group. I hope you get value from these conversations. I hope this clarifies some questions that may have been had about why the Albino Peacock podcast. I know it raises some eyebrows and causes titters occasionally. And I just love it, and it's been such a great adventure, and I'm really looking forward to going along further and bringing all y'all with me. Thanks for being here. See y'all on the next one.